Gabriel's Gospel Grace, changing lives and kingdom building one stone at a time.
Good morning to you, and welcome to the very first Motivational Monday. Yes, Motivational Monday. This is the day that's going to be trying to prepare you for the rest of the week. This is the first of the programs that are going to be rolled out on a weekly, daily basis throughout the week. If you want to check out the previous video, it'll identify exactly what's going to be included in that. But also it's going to include guests, and hopefully over time we'll get some more VIP guests to feature on this program. So Mondays is Motivational Monday, and this is to get you going for the rest of the week. So I thought today what we'd do is we'd start with the topic of motivation before we start throwing you some seeds to develop in. So what is motivation? How does it work? Well, motivation really, there's two schools of thoughts. One is that it comes from within us, and the other one is external. So let's start from the external point of view. And as many of you already know, I am actually a life coach. That's my background among many other career opportunities the Lord led me to. So let's have a look at how this currently works. Let me give you a scenario. The story goes that there was a donkey, and the donkey was sitting there, and it was, in technical terms, a stubborn ass. It wouldn't move. So the way to entice it was to use a carrot. Now, you'll probably find some pictures online and little memes of basically someone sitting on a donkey with a stick held out and with a carrot tied to it, dangle it in front of the nose. That way, of course, every time the donkey tried to take a bite, it stepped forward, and of course it would never get the carrot. So this is the whole concept of carrot and stick. So the carrot is an incentive to entice action, to kind of motivate from a positive perspective of moving forward. Now, of course, carrot and stick also comes with its counterpart, which of course is the stick. So the stick, and I think we see this in horse riding, especially with horse racing, is basically to give it a good smack on the backside and clearly move it forward from that perspective. But I suppose if you think about it, you can kind of break this down into two basic principles. One is incentivizing, which is the carrot, and the other one is punishment, which is the stick. Now, if you spend a little bit of time looking at your average day, you'll find that most of our activities are led by both of these principles, carrot and stick. Many people are simply going to work this morning for the carrot, and literally the carrot is the cash. The carrot of the cash is the incentive. Often it's because we're probably saving towards something, or we're planning to buy something. But more importantly, actually, the incentive actually is to do with the stick, because most people are working and even having second jobs to increase their income to pay for the debts they've already accumulated, such as utility bills or food, or more importantly, things like mortgages and car payments. So when you think about it, the debts create the stick effect, where there will be a consequence by not paying. So if you actually look at most of our life in the modern society, the secular world has put everyone in a feedback loop where you kind of exactly, literally like the donkey with the stick. In other words, they sit on your back dangling the carrot, and when you stop moving, then they will basically smack you with a stick on the backside. So you could say it's almost like we have taskmasters above us in all directions. And that is true, because the same goes for the law. If you think about it, a lot of reasons we don't do certain things in society is because there are laws that prevent us from doing so. Because if we disobey the law, there will be a consequence. You'll also find, especially in the secular world today, there is a lot more incentivizing certain viewpoints. Certain activities are being promoted, certain beliefs are being promoted. Now, again, this is the same approach being used. If you break it down, you'll see there is an incentivization. And typically, in this day and age, especially with regards to mainstream media and advertising, they latch onto the emotional context. Now, whether in the USA or in the UK, we all know programs like X Factor or America/Britain's Got Talent. Now, of course, what we notice, especially in the last decade, is all of a sudden there'd be someone from nowhere that suddenly comes out of the blue, and then suddenly they'll attach a story to that person. We'll find out about the horrors of their life or the things they've had to overcome. the hardships. And we certainly see this with regards to charitable commercials and adverts. It's an emotional string they try and pull on. Now, from that perspective, yes, there's a carrot trying to give you a sense of well-being, that if you do such things, it will make you feel good because you're helping in the world. At the same time, though, they're playing on the emotion of guilt by guilting you into not responding or reacting. These are all quite low-level psychological ploys and tricks, which you'll find in all of your everyday life, which will be the challenge of this week. But carrot and stick is not the only way to move forward in life. This is very much a secular approach. Every business and employer, all the way through to your banks and government, this is always the approach. There will be a reward if you do a certain kind of behaviour, and there will be a discipline if you don't. So what's different about Christians that are born again? And when I say born again, as opposed to born again Christians, there are many Christians who are religious in nature. They go to church, they read a book, but they don't kind of live the lifestyle because they don't experience it. And when I say experience it, I don't just mean emotionally, I mean in a very practical way. So I like to think back to the early church because that's kind of what enticed me into my journey. It was recognising there was something special about the early church. In particular, the way that Paul spoke about the gifts of the Spirit. I recognise even in my life coaching, a lot of those personal gifts, the fruit of the Spirit, were not present in many people, including myself. So what is different then about a Christian that's born again? And how can this benefit you? Well, the obvious is the fact that I've said there are two tricks, the carrot and the stick, the motivation, the punishment. But actually, the Bible actually does give us something else when we're born again, and that's within the Spirit, because there are other motivators that don't equate into the secular life. Those motivators are faith and love. So if we go back to the carrot and stick, actually we can break these down into two camps. The carrot is hope. If you think about it, literally from childhood, you're encouraged to think about your future. Think about getting into college, then consider going to university, all of which should lead you to a career. Why a career? Well, the focus typically isn't about you'll have a happy life. The focus is with a good career, you will contribute to society, and in particular, financially. These careers will lead to much more prosperity financially in life. Then there was also the view of having a family, again, feeding into a system. The whole white picket fence and the nuclear household were certainly pitched in the 80s and 90s. It's not so much anymore. But when you think about it, the whole vision was given to us by society. These are the goals. Once you have a nice career, you can get a nice car. When you have a nice car, you can pursue status. Status equals power. Power equals respect. So there's a whole mindset there that's kind of leading us in a particular direction. So that is certainly, the carrot represents hope in our life. Because even trying to take on extra hours at work to earn more cash is so that you can have the hope of enjoying yourself when you buy tickets to the football match or go to a concert with the extra surplus cash you've earned. So if hope is one aspect, then the other one, sadly, is fear. Yes, fear. The donkey, a little prod, you know, even as an adult man, it's good to be prodded sometimes to say, oi, get moving. That's not a bad thing. But of course, when it gets to the point that you can't move anymore and you're still being beaten, then you start to fear the beatings. The beatings are not prodding anymore. This is partially what leads to inner depression. But it all comes from a place of fear. Fear is the motivator. We see this with relationships. We see it with jobs. And as a life coach, I'd say this is the biggest inhibition, I think. People are inhibited by fear, and people come to me with sometimes the smallest of challenges in life, but the consequence, the fear of a consequence versus a success overrides. So we are definitely in a society that is driven, key word there, driven by fear. Fear of not being successful, fear of not fitting in, fear of not being popular, fear of being alone. Now, of course, the formula, the equation to counteract this, the medicine, if you will, is faith and love. See, through love and not lust, We can do things with no expectation whatsoever. No comeback, positive or negative. We just act in love. Even more so, as a born-again Christian, if our focus of love is on the Lord, then everything we do is for him, and not as an action of works, but simply from a place of love. So we can do more if we apply love in our lives, but that's not even an easy thing to achieve within families of people that love each other. Often it's very hard to do things out of love. So the other avenue is that of faith. Now, faith is a very powerful force. I always find it interesting in the secular world that they've always said, at the end of the day, there is great power in many activities in life and within knowledge. But actually, one idea is a bigger threat to society than any military might. And that's true, but actually the idea has to be fueled by faith. We can't simply step forward into something without having faith it will exist, it will manifest, and it will be possible. We have to see that in our imagination, we have to believe it in our heart, and we have to have faith it will come to pass. So as your motivation today, all I really want you to do for this very first episode is just observe in your week. I want you to be mindful, as the term is, reflect on every decision you're making through your day, especially big ones at work. Just see how many of them decisions are actually coming from a place of either fearing a consequence, fearing an outcome, or because there's something to be gained. There's a carrot. There is some sort of prosperity to be sought after. In either case, there is no guarantee. I think I should highlight that. Some people would say, yes, but love and faith, there's no guarantee at the end of it. But actually, how many people 40 years on still don't own their home, possibly don't own the car? They may have a nice home and a car, but actually the bank owns them, or it's a company car. They have a career that they literally cannot step out of with fear of losing everything. But the challenge is, with faith and love, does it matter if you lose everything? Some of the guests that will be on the show, like me, have stepped out in faith. We kind of walked away from our careers in our past and stepped into something new on faith. And it has proven fruitful for us. New opportunities and new doors have opened, and new direction has manifested. And those old ties of bondage, the chains that held us down, they've been broken. And that is through faith. Admittedly, it came with a lot of help from Jesus Christ, which I know for many of the viewers will not understand any of this at this point. So keep watching these episodes and start to learn something different, something you're not even told in church. Because part of this broadcast is to share with you the lives that we lead through moving in faith and trusting in God and believing that Jesus did come to save the world. Now, if your secular life, your worldview, is not proving fruitful for you, then I challenge you to start following this channel. Subscribe today. Start to see a new way of living. And the irony is, it's not that new. If anything, we're going back to practices our great-grandparents would have been part of, and going back almost 2,000 years now. They often say truth is hidden in plain sight. Well, I think at the moment there's a lot of truth coming out with regards to the carrot and stick effect being used by, well, all the forces around us. But then that also means that the truth of the past, the one that counteracted the darkness before, is still relevant today. So hopefully today you will find that motivation, literally, to pay attention to your week. First of all, we need to identify what our taskmasters are. Are we driven by carrot? As in, we're always looking towards something new that will actually provide the happiness and prosperity in our lives? Or are we driven by the stick? The reasons we get out of bed in the morning, the reasons we go to work, and the reason we put on a fake smile is because we fear a consequence. I'd really like you all to have an opportunity this week to start thinking about how your life could change. Is it possible? How long have you actually been thinking and living this way? Patterns and habits are part of the process of carrot and stick. You learn a particular way of being, and that way of being becomes routine. Part of my job as a life coach, and even now as a minister, is to break the routine, lead you to something new. So with that motivation for the week, step forward, and may God's grace be with you. If you were blessed by this video, why not give it a like? Also subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos.